Well, Omicron is everyone. Omicron is everywhere, rather, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later this week. But we have another one of these tragic stories. In Michigan, when the state issued shutdowns for restaurants, there is a diner that decided to stay open. And the diner stayed open because the diner's owner, John Parney, decided to ignore the law. So the Quincy Diner in Quincy, Michigan stayed open. And John Parney, the 62-year-old owner, is now dead of COVID after 2 months of fighting it. Now, I have to tell you, this one is different from the typical anti-vax nut believes COVID is fake and dies. The guy was anti-vaccine, but this particular story is extra tragic. And I'm not joking here. This is not a joke. Back in December, when Parney said, I'm going to keep the restaurant open, he said, my wife is fighting stage 4 colon cancer. We depend on the restaurant to help subsidize billing and all of that. My employees need that. Of course, if I'd have stayed closed much longer, I'd have lost the business. So this is actually a story about many things. And it's in great part a story about access to healthcare. We say, with universal healthcare, there's no breaking bad, right? Walter White doesn't need to start cooking meth to pay for his treatment if there's universal healthcare. And whenever I say that, some of you will write to me and you'll say, David, well, Walter White was cooking meth to leave his family a nice nest egg, not just to pay for medical treatments. Fine. But Walter White used the meth money to pay for expensive treatments as well. And this guy, Parney, didn't just need to keep the restaurant open to pay for his wife's cancer treatment. He was also working full-time at a casino. Now, it is also true that Parney was not vaccinated, and that is 100% his choice. He told his family he planned to get vaccinated after he ended up in the hospital with COVID. He never made it to that because he died. And now there's a GoFundMe for his final expenses and for his wife's continued cancer treatment, which is still ongoing. She is still with us. So this is really a story about how much of a mess this country is in. You've got a 62-year-old who's unvaccinated by choice. That's part of the weaponized disinformation about the vaccines. He catches COVID and it's really bad. That's one story. We've heard that story a bunch of times. And that's what happens to tons of people. That's why you get vaccinated. There's no doubt about that. But there's the other story, which is he was working at his restaurant and keeping it open and working at a casino to pay for his wife's cancer treatment. And by the way, if your wife has cancer, why on earth would you not get a vaccine in order to protect her? You care enough to keep the restaurant open in defiance of the law to pay for her treatments, but you won't even get vaccinated to protect her. So there's a lot wrong with what this guy did, and there's a lot wrong with this country. But this is also a story about the broken healthcare system as much as it is a story about anti-vaccine ignorance, as we have been talking about for a while at this point in time. So another tragedy, another ignorant guy who didn't get vaccinated, but also a really depressing story about the state of affairs with healthcare in the United States.